Hey guys, Ken here with Hobby Harvest. I was just about to head out to check my trail cams, but I wanted to share with you guys 3 things that you need to really consider before checking your trail cams. Because if you don't, you could be doing a lot of harm to your chances at success in the deer woods. Now first off is the time of day that you go and check your cameras. So in order to understand when the best time of day to check your cameras is, we really need to understand what the deer do in any given 24-hour period in the woods. So about an hour before dark is when the deer get up out of their daytime bedding areas and they head towards that favorite food source of theirs. Now, if you have a successful food plot program, chances are that that's going to be their food of choice at this time. So that's why food plots are very advantageous. So they'll head to those food plots or other food source and they'll graze on them for a while. They'll get a few mouthfuls and they'll hang out there till dark. After dark, they'll head off into some open ag fields or other areas, really just trying to figure out where there might be a better food source. They always think that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and really it does help them because if the food plot or whatever that they're currently feeding on becomes less desirable, they'll know where to move to after that. So they spend all night wandering around, finding other food, going areas they normally wouldn't. Now, deer don't have a clock. They base all of their movement on when the sun rises and when the sun sets. So as they are out going wherever in the middle of the night, you'll often hear that bucks have a 3-mile home range, and that is true, but about 95% of that movement is after dark. So they end up all sorts of places, and then all of a sudden the sun comes up, and they go, oh shoot, I need to get back to my daytime bedding area. So this is when they start moving back. They'll utilize the thickest parts of the terrain as they can to get back there and work their way back there. Now it may take them 2 to 3 hours, depending on how far away they got, to finally get back there. And that's why the morning and the evening are the best 2 times to hunt, because you'll hear guys talk about a morning stand or an evening stand. What they mean by that is a morning stand is trying to find an area that the deer are traveling through before they get back to their daytime bedding area, and an evening stand is something that relates to that afternoon food source. So if you can figure out where the deer are bedding and where the deer are feeding, you should be able to kill them very easily. Now, like I said though, that can change depending on if their food or if their cover becomes less desirable or more desirable somewhere else. Now, after they've made it back to their daytime bedding area, they'll stay there again until like about an hour before dark, and they don't just bed down and lay down all day long. They will get up and graze on like shrub tips and whatever else is in their bedding areas, but they don't move much more than say 100 yards. Now that's different depending on terrain and where you are in the country, but for the most part, that's a good average number. They only move about 100 yards in the middle of the day. That makes this the best time to go check your trail cameras, as long as they are not in daytime bedding areas, because that would be a bad time to go check them. Now, because of this, I tend to not even put trail cameras in daytime bedding areas and try to just put them in areas that are like funnels or whatever that the deer will have to travel through when they leave those daytime bedding areas. Now, if you really want to put a camera in a daytime bedding area, I would recommend getting a cell camera for that area, because then you don't have to go in there to check it and you can just let it sit there until the batteries die. That brings us to the number 2 thing you want to consider before checking your trail cams, and that is the weather. You can really utilize the weather to help hide you when you go to check your trail cameras. Now, any time that it would be a bad day to hunt, it would probably be a good day to go check your trail cameras. And let me give you an example of what that would look like. So let's just say it's windy and it's rainy. That takes away 2 of the senses the deer rely on, and that would be their sense of sight and their sense of hearing. So when it's windy and all the branches are moving, everything in the woods is moving, the leaves are moving, it's raining, rain's hitting everything, they can't sense movement. And that's how deer notice you in the woods. That's how when you're sitting on stand, you usually will see movement first and you'll be like, oh, there's a deer or a squirrel or whatever else. But you see movement before you actually see what you're looking at, and the deer do that too. They just do it a lot better than you do. But when everything in the woods is moving, they lose the ability to do that. Now, also hearing. So when all the branches are moving, the wind's blowing, the rain's hitting everything, they can't hear either because their hearing is being overwhelmed with all of those other noises. Also, if you were to go check your trail camera when it's rainy and windy, the leaves are also really soft because they're wet, so you're not making very much noise going in there. When these conditions are happening, the deer are also in their bedding area. So again, you can check any camera that's not near a bedding area. Now, I do want to remind you that if you do have a food source, you may have a camera on that food source. Deer will bed as close to that food source as they can, so you really do need to also be careful to not bump deer out of their bedding areas just because you're checking a cam on, say, a food plot. So this brings me to the third thing you want to consider, and this is probably the most important one, and that is what time of season is it? So if it's the middle of the rut, you do not want to go checking your trail cameras. That time of year, the deer movement is so random, it's consistently inconsistent. So that time of year, you really want to just be in stand. If you have any time to spend in the woods, be sitting on stand. Now, the other thing is if you were to check your cameras anyway, you're not really getting any intel that's going to help you have a better hunt that time of year because the strategy is to just sit as much as you can. So regardless of what's on the cameras, your strategy doesn't change. Now, you can still check cams if, say, you walk by them on your way into a stand or whatever, and maybe you do want to place your camera locations based on being able to check them as you access a stand location. That's not a bad thing to do, but don't go wandering through the woods checking every camera this time of year. Now, another bad time of the season to check them would be like if you're a shed hunter, don't go wandering around checking all your cameras in January and February because you're going to spook all of your bucks off of your property and they're going to go shed their antlers on your neighbor's property, which is going to really decrease your chance of finding sheds. The rest of the year, you're not going to do too much harm as long as you utilize the first two tips I gave you guys when you go to check your trail cameras. Now, every time you go into the woods, there is a risk you're going to bump deer. You're going to leave scent out there, so you want to minimize the amount of time that you are in the woods checking cams. But if you are going to go check them, it is going to be advantageous to you to consider these three things before you go. Well, I hope that gives you guys advantage in the deer woods and gives you some strategy towards when you check your cameras. I'm going to get out, I'm going to check mine now, and I'll see you guys on the next one.